He thought he had me perfectly cornered. The house, the kids, his mistress with her 3 children, and the bad mom label to push me out. He didn't know I'd seen the statements, heard the calls, or signed the transfer papers 3 months ago. He stood up at Thanksgiving, announcing he'd sell the house for his new family. I just placed an envelope in front of him. "Since you're making announcements," I said. "So am I." My name is Reagan Taylor, and I had been awake since 5 a.m. The alarm wasn't necessary. Sleep had become a shallow, restless thing in the last few months, but on Thanksgiving, the performance had to be perfect. The house in Maple Ridge, Ohio, was cold in the pre-dawn dark, the old floorboards groaning under my feet as I made my way to the kitchen. This day was supposed to be a win, a small, fragile truce in the quiet war my marriage had become. For the first time in what felt like forever, we had both kids on the same day. Mason, at 16, was a whirlwind of social/academic obligations. Piper, at 13, was just starting to find her own orbit. Getting their schedules to align with ours, with my husband Cole's, had been a logistical nightmare. And yet, here we were. I'd wanted everything to scream, "Family is still okay." I wrestled the 20-pound turkey into the roasting pan, my hands slick with butter and herbs. The scent of sage and thyme started to fill the air, mingling with the sweet, earthy smell of the pumpkin pies I'd baked last night. I'd mashed pounds of potatoes until they were creamy, simmered cranberries into a ruby-red sauce, and was now setting the table with the good china. The napkins were a special touch, a complicated origami fold I'd learned on the internet to look like maple leaves. A little on the nose for Maple Ridge, maybe, but Piper used to love them. By noon, the house was warm and smelled like a Norman Rockwell painting. The performance was set. My husband, Cole Manning, 44 years old, and wearing the suit of a man he used to be, finally descended the stairs. He was glued to his phone, as he always was. His face, which I had once known better than my own, was illuminated by the blue-white glow of the screen. He smiled. A quick, private smile that wasn't for me. It was never for me anymore. "Smells good, Ray," he said, not looking up, his thumbs already flying across the screen. He drifted toward the living room, ostensibly to watch the game, but I knew he was just finding a comfortable spot to continue his digital affair. Mason and Piper came down, drawn by the smells. Mason grunted a, "Hey," already looking taller and more cynical than he had any right to be at 16. Piper gave me a real hug. "It looks amazing, Mom." She was the one I worried about. At 13, she saw everything, even the things I tried to hide. We sat down just after 2. The turkey was carved. The potatoes were steaming. The kids were actually talking, telling a story about a teacher at school. I caught Cole's eye, trying to pull him into the moment. "Cole, did you hear that?" He looked up, startled. His focus pulled unwillingly from the phone in his lap. "What? Oh, yeah, great, kids." The conversation faltered. Mason's face tightened. He knew. He'd known for a while. We ate. The sounds of silverware on china filled the silence. The meal was, objectively, perfect. The turkey was moist, the skin crisp. The pies were waiting. It was all a beautiful, hollow lie. And then, just as I was about to suggest we move to the living room, Cole pushed his chair back, the legs dragged against the hardwood floor. A high-pitched, agonizing screech that set my teeth on edge. He stood up. He wasn't looking at me, or the kids. He was looking at a point on the far wall, as if addressing a board meeting. He cleared his throat, using the voice I'd come to dread. His CEO announcing tough but necessary cuts voice. "I have something I need to say," he began. Piper looked up, her fork halfway to her mouth, a smear of cranberry sauce on her chin. "I'm going to sell this house." The words just hung there. They didn't float. They dropped like stones, shattering the fragile piece I'd spent all day building. Mason's face went completely blank. It was the way he protected himself, a stony mask I hadn't seen since we had to tell him his grandfather died. Piper's fork clattered onto her plate. She understood. They both understood this wasn't about real estate. Cole continued, his voice gaining momentum now that the worst was out. He was ticking off points in his head. Look, it's for the best. My girlfriend, Lila Brooks. She has 3 little ones, and they're all cramped in that small rental apartment. It's just not fair to them. My breath hitched. He said her name. He said girlfriend at the Thanksgiving table, in front of our children. Her kids need a backyard. Reagan, he said, finally looking at me, his eyes hard and void of any warmth. They need stability. And this house. He gestured around the dining room, at the maple leaf napkins, at the life I had built, is being wasted on just 3 people. Wasted. That was the word he chose. I watched Mason's knuckles turn white as he gripped the edge of the table. Piper's eyes welled up. Big, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. She was looking at her father as if he'd just morphed into a monster. They weren't just hearing, we're selling the house. They were hearing, I am replacing you. They were hearing, your mother is being replaced by a new woman, and you are being replaced by her 3 children. I felt the familiar, hot sting of tears behind my own eyes, but I pushed it down. It turned into something cold and solid in my chest. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would not give him the satisfaction of a scene. He wanted a scene. He wanted me to be the hysterical, irrational wife so he could be the calm, reasonable man making a tough decision. I didn't move for a full 10 seconds. I just looked at him. He held my gaze, his expression a mixture of arrogance and impatience. He'd done it. He'd dropped the bomb. Now he just had to wait for the fallout. And then he could get on with his new life. Slowly, I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. Mom, Piper whispered, her voice trembling. It's okay, sweetie, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I heard Cole let out an impatient sigh behind me, probably thinking I was running off to cry or throw things. I walked into the kitchen, my heels clicking calmly on the tile. I didn't stop at the knife block. I didn't go for the phone. I picked up my purse from the counter, right where I'd left it this morning. I opened it and took out a thick, cream-colored envelope, legal-sized, heavy. I walked back into the dining room. The air was thick, toxic. Cole was watching me, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes now. This was not part of his script. I walked right up to his side of the table. He'd spilled a small drop of gravy earlier, a dark, greasy stain on the white linen tablecloth. I placed the envelope directly on top of it. Since you're making announcements, I said, my voice clear and cold, cutting through the silence. So am I. I turned, walked back to my chair, and sat down. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of cold mashed potatoes. They tasted like dirt and victory. I looked straight at him. Cole stared at the envelope. His name and mine were on it. But it was from a law firm. He hadn't seen it come in. I'd made sure of that. For the first time all day. For the first time in our entire miserable slide into this disaster. His polished, confident expression cracked. The blood drained from his face. He looked from the envelope, to me, and back to the envelope. He had no idea. He thought he was in control. He thought he had planned his exit perfectly. Lining up his new life, the adoring mistress, the 3 new kids, the house he thought he could just take all before kicking his bad mom wife to the curb. He thought he was the one making the declaration. He didn't know he was just the fool who'd finally given me my cue. That envelope held the real announcement. It held the transfer papers he'd signed 3 months ago, thinking they were a simple refinance. It held the new deed, the one with only my name on it. It held the bank statements showing where our joint money had been going to her kids. And it held the dissolution papers I'd had drawn up weeks ago, just waiting for the perfect moment. He thought he was leaving me with nothing. He didn't know I had already taken everything. The game had just changed, and he was the last one to find out. The bomb Cole dropped at the Thanksgiving table hadn't been built in a day. Its fuse had been burning for months. A slow, toxic hiss I'd mistaken for the normal friction of a long marriage. It really began. I see now, with the daycare. Months before that disastrous meal, back when the air was humid and the kids were still high on summer freedom, my life was a carefully balanced equation. I was a project manager at Harborview Solutions, a job I was good at, a job I had worked hard for. It was demanding, but it was also the reason we lived in Maple Ridge and not some cramped two-bedroom apartment. The pandemic had shifted things, but by this year, the company wanted us back in the office, a hybrid schedule, 3 days in, 2 days remote. This meant Piper, who was still in elementary school then, needed an after-school program. Mason was old enough to drive and manage his own complicated life, but Piper needed care. It was a good program at her school: homework help, art projects, a snack. She liked it. She had friends there. It was, in the grand scheme of modern parenting, a perfect solution. For Cole, it was a weapon. It started as a small jab. I'd come home, tired from a triple-booked day of meetings and a 45-minute commute, to find him on the couch, laptop open but screen dark, a beer already sweating on the coaster. "Another 500 for the after-school thing," he'd say, not looking at me. "Seems like a lot just to have strangers watch our kid." The first time, I defended it. "It's a good program. Cole, she gets her homework done. She likes the art class. What's the alternative? Have her come home to an empty house." "The alternative," he said, finally looking at me, his eyes cool, "is that her mother could be here, if you stayed home, like a real mom. Our kid wouldn't be raised by strangers. A real mom." The words landed like a slap. I was a real mom when I was up all night with Piper's ear infections. I was a real mom when I was coordinating Mason's college applications and driving him to SAT prep. I was a real mom when I was scheduling dentist appointments, buying birthday presents, and remembering his mother's anniversary. But because I also had a PowerPoint presentation due on Friday, I was downgraded. That line became his favorite refrain, his anthem. When the daycare bill arrived in our joint email, he'd forward it to me with a single-word subject: "Again." As if I wasn't the one whose salary more than covered it. When Piper came home with a cold, the kind kids have passed around like trading cards since the dawn of time, he'd sigh. "Well, that's what happens when she's in that germ factory all day. She'd be fine if she were home." At the parent-teacher conference, the one I had to leave work at 2:30 to attend, while he claimed he couldn't possibly get away, he had the nerve to say it to the teacher. "We're just a little concerned about the lack of one-on-one time. Her mother's career is very demanding." He said it with a tone of resigned, noble sadness, as if he were the long-suffering spouse of a work-obsessed monster. The teacher, a woman who probably had 2 kids in daycare herself, just gave him a tight, professional smile. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. It was a special kind of poison. His own career, which he always spoke of in grand, vague terms, was a fortress of exceptions, while I was choosing my career over my family by, God forbid, being in a scheduled meeting at 3 p.m. Cole was a master of the flexible schedule. "Client meeting," he'd text at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, which I later learned from his Instagram-tagged photo. He'd forgotten to block my private account was the back 9 at the country club. "Taking a client to lunch," he'd announce, leaving at 11:30 a.m. and rolling back in at 4, smelling faintly of wine and self-satisfaction. "I've got to be on call for this West Coast deal," he'd say, which apparently required him to be in his home office with the door locked, though I never heard him speak. The first real crack in my denial came from my friend, Sarah, who, in a twist of small-world irony, worked in the accounting department at the same company as Cole. We were having coffee, and I was venting, just a little, about how stressed he seemed. "He's just so buried," I said. "He says this new project is practically 24/7. Sarah frowned, stirring her latte. "Which project? The Northline one? That's what you said last week, right?" "Yeah, I think so. Why?" "It's just, that project wrapped 6 weeks ago," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes sharp. "My team processed the final invoices. Everyone on that account got a comp day on Friday. Cole didn't take it." "No," I said, my blood turning to ice water. "No, he He said he had to go into the office all day Friday for that project. She saw the look on my face and quickly backtracked. Oh, well, I'm sure it was something else then. You know how it is. I probably have the name wrong. But she didn't. I knew she didn't. That was the day I stopped arguing. It was the day I stopped defending myself. When he said, "If you were a real mom," I no longer said, "I am," when he said, "It's because you chose your career." I no longer listed the ways my career benefited our family. I just said, "Okay," and I started to watch. I started to listen. I realized the bad mom narrative wasn't just a stray insult born of resentment. It was a strategy. It was a foundation he was meticulously laying, brick by brick, insult by insult. He wasn't just trying to make me feel guilty. He was trying to build a public case against me. He was creating a story to tell our friends, our family, and eventually, a court. I tried. God, I tried. But she just cared more about spreadsheets than our children. He needed me to be the bad mom who used daycare, because he had found a good mom who didn't. He was building a moral justification to leave, one that would paint him as the victim. The devoted father forced to seek out a real family atmosphere. He was paving the way for Lila Brooks. The woman I would later discover was a stay-at-home mother to 3 young children. She was the perfect foil. She was what he could point to and say, "See, that is what a real mother looks like." He wasn't just having an affair. He was holding auditions to replace me, and he'd used my job as the reason for the casting call. The cold, hard clarity was terrifying, but it was also liberating. The game was no longer about saving our marriage. It was about surviving the wreckage. And he had just told me exactly how he planned to win. He thought my weakness was my ambition, my time spent at the office, the hours Piper spent with strangers. He was wrong. My weakness had been my willingness to debate him, to justify my existence. That was over. If he wanted to use the role of mother to strip me of my rights, my home, and my children's stability, then I would have to use the only tools he respected, the ones he thought I wasn't smart enough or tough enough to wield. I stopped looking at our joint account as a shared resource and started seeing it as a trail of evidence. I stopped thinking of our house as a home and started seeing it as an asset. I made an appointment with a lawyer, not just any lawyer, the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman whose name was whispered in fear by the golfing buddies Cole so admired. He thought he was writing a story where he was the hero, saving his new family from the cold. Career-obsessed witch. He just didn't know I was going to write a different ending. The name Lila Brooks first entered our house not as a threat, but as a tragedy. Cole mentioned her offhandedly one evening, months ago, his tone dripping with a manufactured pity I now recognize as a performance. "Had to stay late to help out someone in finance," he'd said, loosening his tie. "Poor thing. This woman Lila Brooks, her ex just walked out, left her completely high and dry with 3 little kids. Just brutal." I murmured something sympathetic, loading the dishwasher, my mind on a project deadline. At the time, she was just a name, a sad story from his office, another reason for him to feel superior and magnanimous, just another prop in the theater of his life. The props started getting more specific. A few weeks later, he left his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while he went to grab a beer. It was an old, careless habit from a time when he had nothing to hide. A notification lit up the screen, and I glanced over, thinking it might be from Mason. But it was a photo, a new background image on his lock screen. It wasn't me. It wasn't our kids. It was a sunny day in a park I recognized, Hollow Creek, down by the river. Cole was in the foreground, kneeling on one knee. He was smiling. A genuine, unguarded smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He was tying the shoe of a little boy, maybe 7 years old, with a mop of brown hair. In the background, 2 other small children were playing near a picnic blanket. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. He walked back in, grabbing his phone. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice tight. He glanced at the screen, and his face was a mask of perfect, practiced ease. "Oh, that," That's Lila's kid, the one I told you about. She was swamped with a custody hearing or something, so I offered to take the kids to the park for an hour so she could deal with it. Poor little guy's shoelaces are a disaster." He laughed, a casual, charitable sound. I offered to take the kids, not my colleagues' kids, just the kids, as if they were a known quantity. He put the phone in his pocket. She's going through a lot. It's the least I could do." And what could I say? He was being a good Samaritan, a wonderful, caring man helping a poor thing in distress. To argue would make me look jealous and cruel. He was counting on that. But the image was seared into my brain, the paternal tenderness in his posture, the genuine joy in his smile. It was a look he hadn't given his own children in a very long time. After that, the breadcrumbs started appearing everywhere, as if he was either getting sloppy or so arrogant he didn't think he needed to hide them. I was cleaning out his car, a rare fit of domesticity that was really just a search for a misplaced library book, when I found the receipt shoved in the side door. Tiny Steps Outlet. It was a children's store, one we hadn't shopped at in almost a decade. Mason was driving, and Piper was sizing out of the teen section. I unfolded the crinkled thermal paper, one set of dinosaur-themed twin bed sheets, one sparkle princess doll, the deluxe edition, one 3-pack of boys' underwear, size small. The total was over $200. My kids were too old for dinosaurs and princess dolls. The excuse he gave when I confronted him was just as slick as the park photo. "Oh, God, it's a charity drive at the office. We adopted a family for the holidays." It was August. It's a Christmas in August thing," he'd stammered, recovering quickly. "For a local shelter. We're getting a head start. I just grabbed a list." The lie was clumsy, insulting. But it was the lie he chose. I just nodded, filed the receipt in my purse, and said, "That's nice of you. Cole?" The real proof, the kind that was cold and legal and undeniable, arrived by accident. It was a plain white envelope from a major bank, mixed in with the junk mail. It was addressed to Cole Manning Lila Brooks at our home address, not his office, our home. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was a credit card statement, a card I'd never heard of, a joint account. The list of charges was a diary of his new life. Weekly groceries at a supermarket across town, near her apartment complex, a charge at a local furniture rental store, a recurring monthly payment to a preschool, and dozens of small charges, gas stations, fast food restaurants, a children's shoe store. He wasn't just helping a poor thing, he was funding her. He was building a parallel family, a second life, using our money. He had leveraged our stability to buy himself a new one. That night, I created an anonymous social media profile. No picture, a generic name. It took me less than 5 minutes to find her. Her profile was public. It was all there. A gallery of his betrayal, curated with hashtags. She never showed his face. He was too smart. Or maybe just cowardly. For that. But she showed everything else. There was a photo of a home-cooked dinner. "So grateful to have a real man who knows how to treat a family." She'd captioned it, on the wrist of the real man reaching for a glass of wine. I saw it the Omega watch I had given Cole for our 15th anniversary. There was a video of her 3 children, the little boy from the park, laughing as they opened new toys. The dinosaur sheets were on the bed in the background. The sparkle princess doll was in the little girl's arms. The lie about the charity drive felt like acid in my throat. He was actively, deliberately, and financially supporting 3 children who were not his, while simultaneously building a case that I was a bad mother for using an after-school program. The hypocrisy was a physical weight. The final piece clicked into place on a Saturday afternoon in October. Cole was supposedly at a college football game with friends. "Big rivalry," he'd said. "Won't be back late. Don't wait up." Piper had a friend's birthday party at a trampoline park on the other side of town, near that cluster of new apartment buildings. I was driving her home. The sun was setting, and we were arguing lightly about homework. "Mom, look," Piper said suddenly, pointing out the window. "Isn't that Dad?" I followed her finger. We were stopped at a red light. Across the intersection was a small, manicured playground, the kind they tuck into apartment complexes, and there was Cole. He was wearing the sweatshirt of the team he was supposedly watching in a stadium 50 miles away. He was standing by the swing set. He was pushing a little girl, a small, blonde child of about 5, so high she was shrieking with laughter. He was laughing, too. He wasn't at the game. He wasn't with his friends. He was here, at her apartment complex, playing dad. "No, sweetie," I said, my voice like glass. "That just looks like him." The light turned green. I drove away. Piper knew I was lying. I knew she knew. That was the moment the anger cooled into something hard and permanent. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was a methodical replacement. He was test driving a new family. I understood. With perfect, cold clarity. I couldn't scream. I couldn't throw him out. Not yet. He was too insulated by his own lies. Too protected by the good man persona he'd built. His arrogance was my greatest weapon. The more he believed I was the busy, distracted, career-obsessed, bad mom, the more he believed I was too stupid or too preoccupied to see what he was doing right in front of my face. He thought my work was his cover. He thought the daycare was his alibi. So I let him. I let him think I was swamped at Harborview Solutions. I let him think I was just too tired to argue. And I started to build my own case. I took a photo of the credit card statement. I downloaded the bank records. I took screenshots of every single post on Lila's social media page, the watch, the toys, the dinners. I pulled Cole's work schedule and cross-referenced it with the days Sarah had confirmed he wasn't even in the office. I kept the receipt from Tiny Steps Outlet. I organized them all into a file, a digital one, backed up to a drive he would never find, and a physical one, which I kept in a locked box at my bank. He was building a new family. I was building a case. And I was just waiting for him to make the first, irrevocable move. The day after I saw Cole at that playground, I didn't cry. I made an appointment. Mariah Kay. Holden's office was on the 21st floor of a glass and steel building downtown. Her name hadn't come from a frantic Google search. It had come from the former wife of a CEO at my old company, a woman who had been systematically cheated on and who had walked away with everything, including the man's respect. Mariah Kay. Holden specialized in complex asset division and protecting the primary breadwinner. In this marriage, that was me. I walked into her minimalist, intimidatingly quiet office carrying a briefcase, not my purse, a briefcase. I sat across from her at a heavy mahogany table, not a desk, and I placed a 2-inch thick binder on its polished surface. Mariah, a woman in her 50s with razor-sharp gray hair and an even sharper gaze, looked at the binder, then at me. She hadn't said a word beyond, "Come in." "What's that?" she finally asked, her voice low and smooth. "It's my husband," I said. I opened the binder. It was organized. Tab of financials. I slid the joint credit card statement with Lila Brooks' name on it across the table. I followed it with 6 months of our joint checking account statements, with every charge for Tiny Steps Outlet, every crosstown grocery run, every restaurant check for 3, highlighted, tab B, photographic evidence, screenshots of Lila's social media, with the Omega watch and the dinosaur sheet circled, the time-stamped photo I'd taken of Cole at the playground when he was supposed to be at a football game, tab C, his work, a printout of his official company calendar for the last quarter, which was mostly blank next to a log of the days he'd claimed to be swamped at the game, or in the office all day. Tab D, my care. Every receipt from Piper's daycare and after-school program for the last 2 years. A printout of the email correspondence with her teachers, all from me. The schedules for Mason's SAT prep, all paid for by me. Mariah Kay. Holden looked at me. A flicker of something not quite a smile, but approval in her eyes. She put on a pair of elegant, severe glasses and began to read. She didn't speak for a full 20 minutes. The only sound was the quiet shift of paper turning. Finally, she took her glasses off and folded her hands on top of my binder. "Well, Mrs. Taylor," she said, You've done most of my investigator's work for me. Mr. Manning is, to use the technical term, an idiot. He's not an idiot, I corrected her, the words tasting bitter. He's arrogant. He thinks I'm the idiot. He thinks I'm too busy, too tired, and too focused on my job to notice. That's his narrative, isn't it? Mariah said, leaning back. Her eyes scanned me, assessing. Let me tell you what he's going to do. He's building a story. The story is, my wife, Reagan, is a bad mother. She's cold. She's ambitious. She abandons her children to strangers at a daycare so she can chase promotions. It's a classic. He's using your competence as a weapon against you. I nodded, my stomach tight. He says it all the time, that I'm not a real mom. Of course he does, Mariah said, her voice devoid of sympathy, which was exactly what I needed. He has to. He's found a replacement. This Lila. She comes with 3 children and, I'm guessing, no job. She is the living embodiment of the real mom he claims to want. He's going to use her as a moral baseline. He'll argue that he wants his children, our children, in a warm domestic environment, which you have failed to provide because you're at Harborview Solutions 3 days a week. So what happens? He'll try to get the house, she said flatly. He'll argue it should be sold so he can liberate the equity and provide a more suitable home for the kids, a home with a stay-at-home mother, like his new partner. He'll use your bad mom narrative to go for primary custody, or at least to argue for a significant reduction in his support payments. He'll claim you should be paying him, since you're the one with the big career and he's the one trying to raise a family. A chill went through me. It was the exact, sickening echo of the conversation at the Thanksgiving table, only this was 3 months prior. She was predicting his every move. He's already spending our money on her, I said, pointing at the binder. And that, Mariah said, her voice suddenly sharp, is our leverage. That is not just infidelity. Mrs. Taylor, that is financial dissipation. He is actively diverting marital assets to support a paramour and her children. He's not just cheating on you, he's stealing from you. So we file, I said, my heart pounding. We file now. No, the word was absolute. You file now. He's the victim. My wife found out about my affair and, in a fit of rage, she threw me out and locked me away from my kids. He'll fight you on every single thing. He'll hide money. He'll poison the kids. He'll tell everyone you're hysterical. We don't want a fair fight. He's not fighting fair. Then what do? We neuter him, Mariah said. Silently, legally, we take away his power before he even knows he's lost it. We start with the house. She explained it clearly. Ohio is a marital property state, but what Cole was doing using joint funds to set up an entirely separate household gave us an opening. We are going to restructure your assets, she said. I'm going to draft a quitclaim deed. We're going to transfer the house from Cole Manning and Reagan Taylor to Reagan Taylor as your sole and separate property. We will pair it with a stack of other, very boring financial documents, a HELOC renewal application, some investment reallocations. We will present it to him as estate planning or refinancing to get a better rate, something he finds tedious. He'll never sign it, I said. Not if he's planning to sell it. Is he paying attention? Mariah asked. Is he reading the mail? Is he tracking the mortgage? Or is he busy at the playground with Lila's kids? I met her gaze. He's busy. He trusts me to handle all the paperwork. He always has. He calls it wife work. Exactly, Mariah said. He's so busy building his case against you as a bad mom that he's forgotten you're the smart wife who keeps the entire machine running. We will use that. He'll sign. And he did. It was a Tuesday night, about 3 months before Thanksgiving. He'd come home late, smelling like perfume not mine and cheap pizza. He was in a great mood, buoyant and careless. I had a stack of documents on the kitchen island. Hey, I said, my voice perfectly neutral. Our mortgage broker found a way to drop our rate by 0.5 point. Just need you to sign off on these, and a few things for the accountant before tax season. He'd groaned. Ugh, fine. Where? I'd put the stack in front of him, in the middle, between a standard bank form and a brokerage account update, was the quitclaim deed Mariah had drafted. The legal language was dense, but the key line was there. He just had to read it. He didn't. He was too busy. His phone buzzed on the counter. Screen down. Lila, no doubt. Just show me where, Ray, he said impatiently. I pointed. He signed his name that big, arrogant, forward-slanting signature. He signed away his rights to the house he would later try to sell out from under me. He didn't even read the line above his. Thanks, I'd said, sliding the papers away. Great. I'm going to take a shower, he said. Already halfway up the stairs. Already thinking of her. That night, I didn't sleep. I acted. I took Mariah's other pieces of advice. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, a private one in my name only. I went into my company's HR portal and rerouted my direct deposit, my entire salary, from that day forward, went into an account he had no knowledge of and no access to. I went to our bank and opened our shared safe deposit box. I took out everything of value, my grandmother's jewelry, the kids' passports, their social security cards, the original deed to the house. I put them, and the newly signed transfer deed, in a new box at my new bank. Now, Mariah had said to me in our last meeting, comes the hardest part. You wait, you live with him, you act normal, you let him continue to think you're the stupid, preoccupied wife. How long? You don't detonate, she said, her voice firm. You wait for him to hand you the detonator. You wait for him to make a big, stupid, public declaration. Men like your husband, they don't just leave. They need to stage a production. They need to be the hero of their own story. Wait for him to stand up and give his speech. I understood exactly what she meant. I had to wait for a moment that wasn't just my word against his. I had to wait for a moment, in front of our children, where they could see, without question, who was loyal and who was the traitor, who was the bad parent, and who was just bad. So I waited. I cooked dinners. I went to work. I drove carpool. I watched him text his mistress from across the dinner table, and I waited for him to finally, fatally, underestimate me one last time. That cream-colored envelope I'd placed on the gravy stain at Thanksgiving, that was the fully executed, notarized, and filed deed to the house, with a bright pink sticky note from the county clerk on it. That was the statement for my new, very full, private bank account, and tucked neatly behind it was the petition for dissolution of marriage, already signed by me. It was all just waiting for his signature. Or, as it turned out, for his announcement. The silence that fell after my words was heavier than the overcooked meal. It was a thick, suffocating blanket. Mason, his face a mask of pale, furious stone, shoved his chair back. It was a mirror image of his father's earlier movement. But where Cole's was arrogant, Mason's was pure, 16-year-old disgust. He didn't say a word to his father. He looked at me, his eyes dark. I'm going to my room, he said. His voice clipped. Mason, Cole started, his CEO voice wavering, turning into a desperate, paternal one. Don't, Mason snapped. He walked out of the dining room. A few seconds later, the house shook with the force of his bedroom door slamming shut. We all heard it, a punctuation mark on his father's betrayal. Then, a voice, muffled but clear enough, yelled down the stairs, I'm on Mom's side. Cole flinched, as if he'd been struck. That, I saw, had hit him harder than the envelope. Piper, my poor, sweet Piper, was frozen. Her face was streaked with silent tears, her small hands still clutching her napkin. She was looking at the demolished turkey, at the gravy stain on the tablecloth where the envelope had rested. Sweetie, I said, my voice gentle. It's okay. The meal's over. That broke her trance. She looked at Cole, a long, heartbreaking look of disillusionment from a 13-year-old daughter to her father. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was too busy staring at the envelope he had just snatched from the table. He didn't open it. Of course he didn't. He folded it once and jammed it into the breast pocket of his blazer. He was trying to delay to pretend it hadn't happened, to regain some semblance of control. He thought by putting it away, he could put me away. I didn't say, "Aren't you going to open that?" I didn't say anything. I just watched him. My silence, my calm, was a new and terrifying thing to him. It was more unnerving than any scream could have been. His phone buzzed on the table. A long, insistent vibration against the wood. He ignored it. His gaze was locked on me, his jaw working. "What is this, Reagan? What kind of game are you playing?" "Game?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're the one who stood up and announced you were selling our children's home to make room for your mistress's kids. I'm not playing anything. I'm just responding." His phone buzzed again, and again, relentlessly. A text, then another, then a call. The screen lit up Lila. He snatched it, his thumb jabbing the decline button. "Go ahead and take it," I said, starting to gather my own plate and silverware. "I'm sure she's very eager to hear the good news. When do we move in? Cole? Did you tell them? Honey? When do my kids get their new backyard?" His face went from pale to a dull, mottled red. He knew I knew. He just didn't know how much I knew, or for how long. His phone buzzed. Again, he stood up abruptly. "I am not doing this right now." "No," I agreed. "We're not." He gestated toward the living room, running a hand through his hair. A man suddenly trapped. He looked at the envelope in his pocket, then at me. He was clearly wrestling with whether to open it now, in front of me, or to wait. His ego, his need to perform, was at war with his fear. Piper slid off her chair. She didn't go to her father. She didn't run to her room. She walked over to me, her eyes red and swollen, and she picked up her own plate. Then she picked up Mason's. "I'll help you clear." "Mom," she whispered. It was the smallest possible action, and it was a declaration of war. It was the two of us, left to clean up the mess he had made. It showed, in a way no words could. Who was the caregiver? Who was the stable center? Who was the real parent? Cole saw it. He saw her small back as she carried the plates into the kitchen. He saw me follow her. He was left alone in the wreckage of his grand announcement, at a table set for a family that no longer included him. We didn't talk in the kitchen. Piper and I, we just moved. We scraped plates into the trash. We rinsed. We loaded the dishwasher. It was a comforting, normal rhythm in a world that had just tilted off its axis. Every clink of glass was a moment he was left alone out there, stewing. His phone buzzed. I heard it even over the running water. After everything was loaded, I sent Piper upstairs. "Go check on your brother. I'm fine." She hugged me, a fierce, tight hug, and ran. I walked back into the dining room. He was gone. The room was empty, but I heard him. He was pacing, back and forth in the living room, the heavy, restless footsteps of a caged animal. I went to my bedroom, and I did something I hadn't done in 17 years of marriage. I locked the door. I turned the deadbolt. It made a loud, definitive click. I heard the pacing stop. He had heard it. The rest of the night was a symphony of his defeat. He paced. He went outside onto the deck, and I heard him on the phone. His voice a low, furious murmur. He was talking to her. He was, no doubt, trying to spin it. "It's complicated. She's being difficult. Just a little longer. Baby." I took a shower, washing off the smell of turkey and betrayal. I got into bed. I read a book. I did not cry. I heard him come upstairs hours later. He tried the handle. It didn't turn. He knocked. Once, twice. "Reagan," he called, his voice uncertain. I didn't answer. He huffed. "Reagan, this is ridiculous. Open the door." I turned the page of my book. He stood outside for a full minute. I could feel his angry, confused energy seeping under the wood. Then, I heard his footsteps retreat. He went to the guest room. I slept, for the first time in months, a deep and dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke up at my usual time. I put on my workout clothes. When I came out of the bedroom, the house was silent. The guest room door was open. He was gone. I went downstairs. The cream-colored envelope was gone from his blazer, which he'd left thrown over a chair in his haste. But there was another piece of debris. His coffee mug was in the sink, unrinsed. He'd been here. He'd waited, probably wrestling with himself. He had left early. He had taken the envelope with him. I knew exactly why. A man like Cole, a man whose entire identity was built on performance and control, could not open that envelope in front of me. He couldn't risk it, and he certainly couldn't open it at home before going to see Lila. He needed to read it in a safe, neutral space, his car. Probably, in some anonymous parking lot. He needed to absorb the shock alone. He needed to understand the full scope of his defeat, so he could invent a new, more plausible lie to tell his mistress. He was still trying to manage the narrative. He didn't realize the story was over, and I had already written the ending. I made a pot of coffee. I drank a full cup, watching the cold November sun rise over my backyard. I ate a piece of toast. I made a list: call the bank, email Mariah, change the locks. I was in complete control. The man who had stood up at Thanksgiving, puffed up with the power to destroy my life, had just fled his own home, clutching a packet of papers he didn't have the courage to read. The shift had happened. He had just entered the first stage of losing every single thing he had taken for granted, and I was going to enjoy my coffee. I wasn't there. Of course, I didn't get to see his face when the reality of that envelope hit him. It's the one part of the whole thing I truly regret. But I've replayed the scene in my mind 1,000 times. I know him. I know exactly how it happened. He wouldn't have gone home to his mistress. He couldn't. He couldn't risk her seeing him confused or defeated. Not when his whole pitch to her was about strength and control. He wouldn't have gone to the office either. He was too spooked. And besides, he was supposed to be on a family holiday. The picture of a devoted, if long-suffering, husband, no. He would have driven to a neutral, anonymous place, the parking garage at his own corporate campus, probably level 3, facing a concrete wall, a gray, soulless place for a gray, soulless man. He would have sat there, the engine off, the car ticking as it cooled. The Friday after Thanksgiving, the garage would have been nearly empty. He would have stared at the cream-colored envelope for a long time. He'd tell himself it was just a bluff. Just Reagan being dramatic. He'd check his phone. A dozen texts from Lila. No doubt. Well, how did it go? Did you tell her, are they packing? He'd ignore her. He'd have to deal with me first. Finally, he'd tear the envelope open, probably with a frustrated, aggressive rip. He'd pull out the papers. The petition for dissolution of marriage would have been on top, just as Mariah had arranged it. He'd see the word dissolution and maybe even scoff, a threat, a desperate, last-ditch effort from the bad mom he was so easily replacing. Then he'd see the attachments. He wouldn't understand the bank statements at first, just that they were there, but he would understand the deed. It was the centerpiece. He'd pull out the single, crisp page. He'd see the official stamp from the county recorder's office. He'd see the pink, recorded sticker. He'd scan the dense legal text. His eyes would catch on the names. He'd see Cole Manning. He'd see Reagan Taylor. And then he'd see the language Mariah had highlighted. Granting and quitclaiming all rights, title, and interest to. He'd follow the line. Reagan Taylor, a married woman, as her sole and separate property. Then he'd see the date, 3 months ago. He'd freeze. He'd try to place it, a date in August. And then he'd remember. That Tuesday night. Just some refi papers, honey. Accountant needs this for the taxes. He'd remember me, standing at the kitchen island, pointing. He'd remember himself, impatiently scrawling his signature, his phone buzzing in his pocket with a text from her. He signed it. He'd signed his own execution. The house he had stood up and so generously announced he was selling wasn't his. It hadn't been his for 90 days. His breath would have gotten shallow, the air in his luxury car, suddenly too thin. He'd drop the deed and scramble back to the petition, reading it this time, really reading it. He'd see the cause, dissipation of marital assets, and then, Exhibit A, a full itemized copy of the joint credit card statement, the one in his and Lila Brooks' names. Exhibit B, the receipt from Tiny Steps outlet for dinosaur bed sheets and a princess doll. Exhibit C, a spreadsheet, meticulously prepared by me, cross-referencing his late nights at the office, with the dates and times he'd gassed up in the neighborhood near her apartment. This wasn't a bluff. This was an autopsy. His first instinct, his only instinct, would be to bully, to regain control. He'd grab his phone, his fingers slick with a sudden, cold sweat. He'd hit my name. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, right next to my second cup of coffee. I watched his name flash on the screen. I let it ring. Once, twice. Then I silenced the call. A second later, a text message. What the hell is this? Another. Call me now. Another. Reagan, you do not want to do this. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was perfect. I picked up my phone and typed a simple sentence. Read the rest of it. Back in that concrete tomb, he'd be staring at my reply. Read the rest. What else could there be? And then, as if on cue from God himself, his screen would light up with an incoming call, not a text, a full-on FaceTime, Leela. He couldn't decline, not after last night, not after his grand promise. He had to perform. He'd wipe his damp forehead, try to rearrange his face from panicked animal to conquering hero. He'd jab the accept button. Her face would fill the screen. She'd be in her cramped kitchen, one of her kids wailing in the background. She would not look happy. Well, she'd snap. No, hello? I've been texting you. Did you tell her? How did it go? Lila, hey baby, he'd start, his voice a cheap imitation of his usual swagger. Listen, it's a bit complicated. Complicated? Her voice was thin and sharp. What's complicated? You said you were telling her. You said you were selling the house. We had a plan. Cole, my kids are already picking out their rooms. I know. I did. I told her. He'd say, trying to sound firm. And she's not taking it well. I don't care if she's not taking it well, Lila would screech, the background wailing intensifying. Is she packing? When is she out? When do we move in? You promised me that backyard. Cole? We're going to get the backyard, he'd say, the lie sticking to his tongue. It's just, there's a small problem with the house. What problem? A paperwork problem. Lila's face would go very, very still. The anger would drain away, replaced by a cold, transactional suspicion. What? Paperwork? Problem. He'd have to say it. He'd have to admit, to the woman he'd been funding and lying to, that he was a fool. It seems, the house, it's not in my name. He'd probably mumble it, but she'd hear. What? It's just in Reagan's name? He'd say, louder now, defensive. She tricked me. She had me sign some papers. It's a legal thing. I can fight it. But Lila wouldn't be listening to his excuses. She'd be staring, her brain finally catching up. She wasn't in love with Cole Manning. She was in love with Cole Manning's house. She was in love with his stability, his income, his solution, and he had just told her the product was defective. She tricked you. Lila's voice would be deadly quiet now. The woman you told me was a bad mom. The woman you said was too stupid and self-absorbed to notice anything. The one who was always at daycare because she couldn't handle her own life. Lila, baby, that's not... I can fix this. I'll get a lawyer. I'll prove in court that... You'll what? Cole? She'd spit. And now her mask was off. This wasn't a damsel in distress. This was a pragmatist. You told me she was the problem. You told me she was a bad mother for using daycare, for working, for not being there. You said I was a real mother. You said I deserved that house, that my kids deserved it. They do, and they will. He'd plead. No, they won't, she'd hiss. Because you're an idiot. You sat there and let your stupid wife play you like a fiddle. You know what this makes you. Cole. You're worse than her. You said she was a bad mom. But at least her kids have a house. You can't even get one for mine. You're nothing. Lila, wait. The screen would go black. She'd hung up on him. He would be left in the silence of the parking garage, staring at his own pale, shocked reflection in the dark screen. He had just lost his house, his wife, his children, and his mistress, all in the space of 18 hours. And the worst part, the part that would truly destroy him, was that the woman he'd betrayed me for had just called him a failure. And she was right. His grand play, his entire narrative, had been flipped. He wasn't the hero leaving his bitchy, inattentive wife. He was just the fool who got left with nothing. Cole's response, once the shock wore off, was as predictable as it was pathetic. He couldn't fight me on the money. The bank statements were black and white. He couldn't fight me on the house. His own signature was on the deed. So, just as Mariah had predicted, he went for the only thing he thought he had left. He went for the kids. His lawyer, a slick man whose suit looked a size too tight, sent Mariah a letter. It was a masterpiece of sanctimonious fiction. It claimed Cole was deeply concerned for the emotional and physical well-being of Mason and Piper. It painted a picture of a distracted, career-focused mother-me and a desperate, involved father, him who was only trying to provide a stable, nurturing, and present home environment. It was, in short, the bad mom narrative. Now on official letterhead, he was formally petitioning for primary custody. "He's an idiot," Mariah said on the phone, her voice dripping with the same bored contempt I was beginning to feel. "He's just handed us the bat. Now, we hit it back." The folder I'd built, Tab D, was no longer just a defensive measure. It became our primary weapon. It wasn't just a stack of daycare receipts. It was a 2-year-long, month-by-month log of my parental engagement. It had every email I'd sent to every teacher. It had the sign-in sheets for every dentist, orthodontist, and doctor's appointment, all with my signature. It had the payment records for Mason's SAT prep course and the application fees for the colleges he was looking at. It had the registration for Piper's drama club, the soccer league before that, and the summer coding camp she'd loved. It was a meticulous, undeniable, and, frankly, exhausting record of my lack of presence. But evidence alone wouldn't win this. Cole was still their father, and he was. I knew, already calling them, texting them, trying to poison them with his side of the story. I had to talk to them first. I sat them down in the living room 2 days after Thanksgiving. The house was quiet. The front door locks had been changed. Cole's things were in a few boxes in the garage, waiting for him to pick them up. They were nervous. They looked like children braced for a blow. "I am not," I started, my voice very calm, "going to tell you a long, ugly story about your father. You are both smart enough to have seen what happened at that table." Mason just crossed his arms, his face set in that stony, protective mask. Piper picked at a thread on the sofa. "Here's the truth," I said, looking them both in the eye. "Your father has a girlfriend. He has been spending our family's money on her and her 3 children. He wanted to sell this house, our house, so they could all move in and he could give them a backyard." Piper's breath hitched, but she didn't cry. She just looked angry. He told me I was a bad mom because I work," I continued, the words still stinging. "He told me that using an after-school program for you, Piper, and a daycare for you, Mason, when you were little, meant I didn't care. He was trying to use that as a reason to take everything." Mason looked up, his eyes flashing. "That's bullshit." "Mason, language. But yes, it is. I need you to understand. My job, the one he complained about, is what paid for this house. It's what pays for your car insurance. Mason, it's what pays for your phone and your drama club. Piper, I work to keep this family stable. He was working to build a new one." The silence was heavy. I had not bared my soul. I had not cried. I had just laid out the facts. I was a project manager, and this was the project status. Mason stood up and walked to the window. "So what he said, that was all a lie. just to get us to, move in with her. The disgust in his voice was thick. That was his plan, I said quietly. He's an asshole, Mason said. And this time, I didn't correct his language. Later that evening, Cole called, not me, Mason. I saw his name light up on our son's phone. Mason looked at me, and I just nodded. It's your choice to answer. He answered. He put it on speaker. Mason, son, thank God. Listen, I know you're upset. You're pathetic. Mason cut in. No greeting. Cole's voice faltered. Son, that's your mother talking. She's twisting this. I was just trying to... You were just trying to what? Mason shot back, his voice cracking with a rage I'd never heard from him. You were trying to kick us out. You stood there and said Mom was a bad mom because she works. Who the hell do you think paid for? For everything. She's the one who's at every single game. She's the one who helps me with my essays. You're never even here. You're at client dinners. Mason, you don't understand the adult situation. I understand that I was in daycare from the time I was 2 and I'm fine. Dad, Mason was shouting now, years of resentment pouring out. I liked it. At least I wasn't at home with you, waiting for you to get off the couch. Mom working doesn't make her a bad mom. You leaving makes you a bad dad. He hung up. The click was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Piper's move was quieter, but no less brutal. The next day, she was at her after-school drama club, the one Cole had specifically named in his rants as a waste of money and glorified babysitting. My phone buzzed with a notification. She had sent me a text. It was a screenshot of a message she had just sent to her father. It was a selfie. She was on stage, grinning, her face bright with stage makeup, her friends hamming it up behind her. Beneath it, she had written a single line. Just so you know, if Mom didn't work, I wouldn't get to do this. This is what the daycare money pays for. I'm glad she has a job. I forwarded the screenshot to Mariah with the note, for the file. I also sent Mariah one last thing, a voice memo I'd found on my old phone. It was from a year ago. I'd been recording a note to myself, and he had walked into the room, ranting. I had just let it record. It was 30 seconds of pure venom. Another $600 to these people. Reagan, it's a waste. It's paying a stranger to do your job. If you just get your priorities straight and be a mother, we wouldn't be throwing this money down the drain. The first mediation session was held in a sterile conference room. Cole was there, looking gray and diminished. His lawyer was loud. He started right in. My client has serious concerns. Ma'am, Ms. Taylor's demanding career at Harborview Solutions means she is functionally an absent parent. She relies on a patchwork of paid third-party care. He was still on the bad mom script. He hadn't realized the show had closed. Mariah let him finish. Then she looked at the mediator, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. My client does work, yes, Mariah said, her voice calm and professional. She is, in fact, the primary earner for this family. The patchwork of care Mr. Manning's lawyer refers to is the top-rated after-school program in their district, which has allowed his daughter, Piper, to become a leading member of her drama club. She slid Piper's screenshot across the table. The mediator looked at it. Reagan, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was steady. I'm sorry. My name is Reagan. I looked at Cole. His name is Cole. I turned to the mediator. Cole's issue isn't with my work schedule. His issue is that he was having an affair with a stay-at-home mother, and he needed a moral justification to replace me. He called me a bad mom for working, but I was working to provide the stability he was actively trying to destroy. I leaned forward. I work, ma'am, so my children don't have to be uprooted from their home and forced to live with the 3 children of the woman he was cheating on me with. The air went out of the room. Cole's lawyer's mouth snapped shut. Cole sank in his chair, his face ashen. I had taken his only narrative and turned it inside out. He wasn't the concerned father, trying to save his kids from a cold, career-driven mother. He was the selfish adulterer, trying to sell his own children's home to fund his new life. I wasn't the absent mom anymore. I was the protector. The mediator looked at Cole, her expression unreadable. Mr. Manning, given the disturbing nature of these allegations and the clear preference of the minor children, who are of an age to have their opinions heard, I am granting temporary primary custody to Ms. Taylor in this house. She looked at her calendar. Your visitation, she said to Cole, will be on alternating weekends, and it will be contingent on you providing the transportation and working around their established schedules, including, yes, Piper's Drama Club. It was a total reversal. He had tried to use the daycare, my work, my ambition as a weapon to get my kids, and I had just used it as a shield to prove that I was the only parent he'd left them with. His entire ego was built on the idea that he knew best how to raise children. I'd just had a court of law tell him he wasn't even qualified to set their schedule. A man who has lost his primary narrative doesn't just give up. He scrambles to write a new one. Cole's story had just been violently edited, and he was left without a protagonist, a setting, or a plot. His first frantic move was to secure his co-star. He had promised Lila a house. He had promised her 3 children a backyard. He had based his entire betrayal on the premise that he was a provider, a man of substance, a better option. Now, he was just a guy sleeping in a guest room, locked out of his own life. His first stop, I learned later, was his boss. He went to Northline Strategy Group, the company where he'd spent years cultivating an image of effortless success. He didn't ask for a raise. He asked for a draw, a significant one. Just a temporary cash flow issue, Mark, he'd have said, all false confidence. A sticky divorce, you know how it is. His boss, Mark, however, was not in a sympathetic mood. Northline, it turned out, was in the middle of a strategic restructuring. That was a corporate euphemism for the balance sheet looks terrible. Sorry, Cole, his boss said, not sounding sorry at all. We're in a spending freeze. In fact, we're looking at cutbacks. I can't authorize a single dime in advances. You should probably be more focused on your third quarter numbers right now. To be honest, the first door slammed shut. He was not the valued rainmaker. He was just another employee on a spreadsheet, and his numbers were, apparently, not good. He left the office, a prickle of real fear now. He sat in his car, the car I was technically still paying the lease on, and called Lila. He was in full-on damage control mode. Baby, hi, listen, I've got a plan, he'd have said, his voice too loud, too fake. Forget that house. It's tainted. Reagan's. She's unstable. We're better off starting fresh. I'm looking at a place in Cedar Falls. Beautiful. Great schools. Huge yard for the kids. He was promising a new dream, a better one. Cedar Falls was one of the most expensive suburbs in the county. He was selling a fantasy he couldn't possibly afford. He was scrolling through rental listings on his phone as he talked, seeing the price tags $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, all asking for first, last, and a security deposit. That's what I'm talking about, Cole, I can imagine her saying, her voice warming just a little. So, when can we see them? I can pack up the kids' rooms tonight. Soon, he said, the word vague. I'm just transferring the funds. You know, lawyers froze a few things. Just a tactic. I'll handle it. I'll have the deposit money by Monday. He hung up, the lie sitting heavy in the air. He had to get that money. He opened his banking app. He went to the joint account, the one that held our savings, our emergency fund, the money I had systematically built. He was probably expecting to see at least $50,000. He saw $254. I had been there first. The moment he'd signed that deed, I'd begun the process, meticulously documented and legally sanctioned by Mariah, of moving all marital assets into a trust account, pending the dissolution. It wasn't Reagan's account. It was Exhibit D assets to be divided. He couldn't touch it, and the salary he'd been earning, it was just gone, spent on Lila, on golf, on lunches. He was broke. Not just cash flow issue broke, he was broke. He couldn't get the rental in Cedar Falls. He couldn't even get a one-bedroom apartment. He had to tell her. The transfer's taking longer than I thought. He'd have texted. How long, she'd reply. Instantly. A few days. Maybe a week. The lawyers are just being slow. Oh, she'd write back. Just oh. Not, that's okay, baby. Not, I believe in you. Just the cold. Two-letter dismissal of a contractor whose client had just failed a credit check. Lila wasn't stupid. She had 3 children to feed. She had latched onto Cole because he represented an immediate, turnkey solution: a big house, a steady income, a replacement father. He had just proven, in no uncertain terms, that he was an expired coupon. The texts he sent her that day started getting left on read. Her replies, when they came, were one word. Then, the visitation weekend loomed. His first scheduled weekend. He was still living, I assumed, in Lila's cramped, 2-bedroom apartment, the one with no backyard. He texted the kids. Hey, looking forward to seeing you both on Friday. Come to my place. We'll order pizza. Mason replied first. Can't. I have that big history paper and a calculus test. I'm going to be at the library all weekend. Sorry. Piper's came an hour later. I have rehearsal for the play both days, and a lot of homework. I can't this weekend. They hadn't even coordinated the lie. They didn't need to. They just both knew they weren't going. They weren't going to sit in that woman's living room, surrounded by her children's toys, the toys he had bought with their money. He was sitting in an apartment that wasn't his, with a woman who was already ignoring him, having just been rejected by his own children. He was, in every meaningful sense of the word, homeless, no house, no wife, no kids. He did the only thing a desperate man could do. He called his lawyer. She tricked me, he yelled into the phone, probably pacing the small patch of linoleum in Lila's kitchen. That quitclaim deed. It's fraud. I was misled. His lawyer, who was probably charging him by the minute, let out a long sigh. Mr. Manning, I've reviewed the document. Did you sign it? Yes, but were you under duress? Did she hold a gun to your head? No, but she bundled it with other papers. She said it was for a refinance. That's not fraud, Mr. Manning, the lawyer said, his voice tired. That's just you not reading what you sign. It's a valid, notarized, and recorded document. We can fight it, but it will cost you tens of thousands, and a judge is not going to look kindly on this. On what? Cole demanded. On this, the lawyer said, and I can imagine him tapping the file Mariah had sent over. You're the party who was engaged in a long-term affair. You're the party who was verifiably dissipating marital assets to support a new family. You're the one who announced, in front of your children, that you were selling their home. And now you want to cry foul because your wife was smarter than you. A judge will laugh you out of court after they're done awarding her your pension. Another door slammed. The legal one. He was well and truly trapped. And then, as if the universe had one last joke to play, he saw it. He was probably stalking Lila's social media, desperate for a sign, a breadcrumb. She had posted a story. It was a picture. Not of him, not of her kids. It was a picture of a drink, a fruity cocktail, held up in a cheers pose. Next to it was another drink, a beer, held by a man's hand, a different man. This one had a thick leather watch band and a different set of knuckles. The location tag wasn't her apartment. It was a local steakhouse. He had been replaced. It had taken less than a week. He must have sat there, in her living room, surrounded by the dinosaur sheets he'd bought, and realized he wasn't her savior. He was just the guy who had failed the audition. He went to work the next day. He had to. He had no money, no home, no family. The job was the only thing he had left. He sat at his desk, staring blankly at his monitor. A man in freefall. And then, at 10:15 a.m., an email popped into his inbox. It wasn't from a client. It wasn't from his boss. It was from Human Resources. Subject: formal notice. Violation of professional conduct policy. The message was brief. Dear Cole, it has come to our attention that a potential conflict of interest and violation of company policy regarding interoffice relationships has occurred. We need to meet with you and a representative from legal at 2 p.m. today. The gossip had leaked. His affair with Lila, a woman in the finance department, wasn't a private tragedy. It was a corporate liability. The man who had stood up at Thanksgiving to declare himself the king of a new life was now just a guy in a bad suit, scrambling to save the one thing he had left, his job. The HR meeting was a quiet, brutal dismemberment. I wasn't there, but Mariah got the report from Cole's lawyer during a discovery call. Cole had been given a formal warning and was put on probation. He hadn't been fired, not yet, but he was now toxic. He was the guy who'd not only had an affair with a subordinate in finance, but had done it so badly, so messily, that it had blown back and become a legal liability. He was a man clinging to the last rung of the ladder. He had no house, no savings, no mistress, and now, a job that was hanging by a thread. He had only one card left to play: family. His parents. I knew he'd been calling them. David and Joan Manning were good, traditional, Midwestern people. They believed in for better or for worse. They believed in staying together for the kids. I knew, without having to hear it, the story Cole was feeding them. Reagan's obsessed with her job. She's cold. She's changed. She's kicking me out, turning the kids against me. She's just unreasonable. He was painting himself as the sad, bewildered husband, the victim of a modern, ambitious, and bad mother. It was time for the final lock. I had to take away his last audience. I called my parents. I called his. I invited them all to dinner. Just a simple meal, I'd said on the phone to Joan, his mother. Just a roast chicken. It's time we all talked, properly, about the situation. She'd been hesitant, her voice cool. Cole said, "You're not really willing to talk." Reagan? "I'm willing to talk," I said. "Please, this Saturday, 7. They came. My parents, who knew the whole truth, looked like they were attending a funeral. His parents, Joan and David, walked in with the stiff, judgmental posture of people who had already picked their side. Cole was already there. He'd been ordered to come. He sat in the living room, in my living room, looking sullen and cornered. We didn't eat first. There was no pretense of a social gathering. I had set the dining room table, not with food, but with folders, 4 of them. "Please," I said, gesturing to the table. "Sit down." We all sat. It felt like a tribunal. Mason and Piper were not present. Not for this part. "Thank you all for coming," I started, my voice clear and formal. I looked at Joan and David. "I know this is incredibly painful, and I know you have been hearing a version of events from Cole." "Reagan," Joan began, her voice trembling with held-in piety, We don't understand. A marriage. It's a sacred thing. Cole told us you're just throwing it all away. He says you've become so focused on your work." "Thank you, Joan." I cut her off, politely but firmly. "That's exactly why we're here. Because I'm not throwing anything away. What we had was already destroyed, and I wanted you to see how—" I slid 2 of the folders across the table to them. My parents each opened theirs, though they'd already seen the contents. "What is this?" David, his father, asked, his voice gruff. "That," I said, "is a credit card statement, a card Cole opened, in his name and the name of his mistress, Lila Brooks, using our home address." Joan gasped, her hand flying to her throat. David's face hardened. Cole, across from me, just stared at the table. He said nothing. "Go ahead," I said. "Look through it. You'll see the charges. Groceries, furniture rentals, children's shoes." I let them leaf through the pages for a full minute. I let the evidence sink in. The dates, the stores, the amounts. Then I leaned forward. "Joan, David, I have a genuine question for you both. You know your grandchildren. Mason is 16, Piper is 13. They are wonderful, and they are practically grown. I pointed to a highlighted line item from Tiny Steps Outlet. Can you tell me which one of them, this past August, needed dinosaur-themed twin bed sheets? David looked at the charge, then at his son. Cole. Or this one. I continued. Relentless. A Sparkle Princess Deluxe doll. Was that for Mason? Or perhaps Piper wanted to. Reagan, this is... Cole started, his voice a low growl. This is private. You have no right. Was it private when you spent over $12,000 of our family's money on another woman's family? I snapped back. Was it private when you stood up at my Thanksgiving table, in front of our children, and announced you were selling this house so you could move them in? Joan's head snapped around. You what? Cole? You did what? Cole's face was a mask of dull, red shame. He was silent. That's right, I said, my voice softening now, turning from anger to a cold, hard sadness. He didn't just have an affair. He built an entire parallel life, and he was going to pay for it with our children's home. But why? Joan whispered. She was looking at her son with a dawning horror. Because he had a story, I said. A very good one. And this is the part I really need you to hear. For the past year, Cole has been telling me, and anyone who would listen, that I am a bad mother. He wouldn't, David started. He would, I said. He told me I was not a real mom because I work at Harborview Solutions. He told me that sending Piper to an after-school program was paying a stranger to do my job. He was building a case, you see, a public case, for all of you, that I was a cold, career-obsessed woman, so that when he finally left me for his stay-at-home mistress, he would be the victim. He would be the good father, escaping the bad mom to find a real family. I let that hang in the air. The full, ugly architecture of his plan, laid bare. I don't believe it, David said, but his voice was weak. He wanted his son to deny it. Cole, tell her. Cole just stared at his hands. You don't have to believe me, I said. Why don't we ask the kids? I stood and went to the doorway. Mason, Piper, can you come in here? Please? They came in. Their faces were pale, but resolved. They knew what this was. They stood behind my chair, one on each side, a united front. Kids, I said gently, Grandma and Grandpa Manning are here. They just want to know the truth. Have I been an absent mother? Have I been too focused on my job? Mason spoke first, his new, deep voice, clear and strong. No, Grandma. No, Grandpa. That's just a lie Dad's been telling. Mom's the one who's at everything. She's the one who's home every night. She drives me to all my college visits. She's the one who's here. Dad's the one who's always busy or at client dinners. He's been lying to all of us. Piper, smaller but no less brave, stepped forward. Her voice was small, but it cut through the room. Grandma Joan, I heard Dad at Thanksgiving. He said he was selling our house for those other kids. Her voice broke, but she didn't cry. I don't want to live with that lady. I don't want her kids in my room. Mom works so we can keep our house. Dad, he just wanted to give it away. It was done. The two-pronged testimony of the children was more powerful than any bank statement. Joan Manning closed her eyes. David put his face in his hands. The entire, carefully constructed poor Cole narrative had just evaporated. They were traditional people, yes, and what they saw was a son who had betrayed not just his wife, but his own children. He had tried to steal his children's home to give it to a mistress. There was no excuse for that. There was no both sides to that story. I stood up. The meeting was over. I just want to be clear, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the full weight of finality. So there are no more stories, so no one is confused. I am divorcing Cole. He is not leaving me. He is not the victim. I put my hands on the back of my chair. This house, the one you are sitting in, I paid for the down payment. My salary has paid the mortgage for 17 years, and 3 months ago, Cole legally signed all of his rights to it over to me. It is in my name, and my name alone. I looked at him, a final dismissive glance. There is no new family moving in here. There is no backyard for anyone else's children. My children are staying here, with me, Cole. We'll be leaving. The discussion is over. His parents didn't even look at him. They just stood up, gray-faced and broken. Joan walked past her son as if he were a stranger. "David," she said, "take me home." He had no one left, no one to lie to, no one to take his side. The jury of his peers, his own parents, had seen the evidence. He was guilty, and he was, finally, alone. The final mediation was not held in a public court. There was no judge in robes, no gallery, no "all rise." It was, in some ways, worse. It was held in a sterile, silent conference room on the 30th floor of a building that overlooked the entire city, a place that smelled of old money and quiet, expensive executions. We sat on opposite sides of a mahogany table so long and polished I could see my own reflection in it. It was me and Mariah Kay, Holden on one side, our files stacked neatly. On the other side sat Cole, looking a decade older than he had at Thanksgiving. His suit was wrinkled, his face was ashen, and his lawyer looked like a man who had already accepted defeat and was just running out the clock. At the head of the table sat the mediator, a retired judge with a face like carved granite. Cole's lawyer started first, his voice hollow, rambling about an unfortunate breakdown in communication and a desire for an amicable path forward for the children. Mariah let him speak for exactly 90 seconds, then she held up a single, perfectly manicured hand. The lawyer stopped, mid-sentence. "We are past communication," Mariah said, her voice cutting through the silence. "We are here to sign the dissolution papers. My client has been more than generous, but since you've chosen to contest the custody arrangement, let's not waste the mediator's time. Let's review the facts." She didn't open a binder. She didn't need to. She had the timeline memorized. "On May 4th, she began, her voice crisp and measured. Mr. Manning opened a joint credit card with his paramour, Ms. Lila Brooks. From that date until November 21st, he illegally dissipated $11,450 in marital assets. These were not breakdown in communication expenses. They were, and I quote the receipts, dinosaur bed sheets, sparkle princess dolls, and the security deposit on an apartment my client has never seen. Cole sank lower in his chair. His lawyer started to speak. "I am not finished," Mariah said. "On August 12th, she continued, Mr. Manning, while of sound mind and body, signed a notarized quitclaim deed, legally transferring the marital home at 12 Maple Ridge Drive to my client as her sole and separate property. This was done in exchange for her liquidating a portion of her personal stock to cover a significant debt he had incurred. He read the document. He signed it. He was misled." Cole's lawyer interjected, his voice too high. "He was told it was a simple refinance. He's a 44-year-old financial strategist," Mariah shot back. "If he cannot read a one-page document, that is a matter of professional competence, not legal duress." And finally, on November 27th, at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of his 2 minor children, Mr. Manning publicly announced his intention to sell that same home, a home he no longer owned, to provide, and again I quote him, "a backyard for his new girlfriend's kids." She paused, letting the full, ugly timeline settle in the room. "My client," the lawyer stammered, shuffling his papers, "my client's actions were motivated by a deep and abiding concern for his children. He felt they were in a neglectful environment. Ms. Taylor's demanding career, her constant reliance on third-party daycare." He had said it. He had actually said the word. Mariah smiled. It was a terrifying, bloodless expression. Daycare, she repeated, as if tasting the word. You want to litigate my client's parenting. Excellent. She slid a slim blue folder across the table to the mediator. I'm so glad you brought that up. Mr. Manning has based his entire fictitious case on the idea that my client is a bad mom because she works. He, on the other hand, is the present parent. Let's see. She tapped the folder. In that file, you will find Mason Taylor's PSAT scores, placing him in the 98th percentile nationally. You will find his application receipts for 3 early decision universities, all paid for by my client. You will find Piper Taylor's most recent report card, straight A's. You will find a letter from her drama teacher, lauding her as the most valuable member of the club, I'll add, that my client pays for and volunteers at. She leaned forward. You'll find 2 years' worth of sign-in sheets for dentist appointments, orthodontist appointments, and parent-teacher conferences. All of them bear Ms. Taylor's signature. Not one bears Mr. Manning's. The only neglect in this equation, counselor, is the profound neglect Mr. Manning has shown his own children while he was busy building a new family with a stranger. She then looked directly at the mediator. The core of the issue is this. Mr. Manning called my client a bad mom for working to support her family, but he is the man who actively tried to sell the roof over his own children's heads to house 3 children who are not his. He didn't just abandon his role as a husband, he abandoned his role as a father. He has no moral, legal, or financial standing. He will sign this agreement. Today, the mediator looked at the folder. He looked at Cole. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Counselor, he said to Cole's lawyer, his voice heavy with finality, I strongly suggest your client sign this agreement, every single page, because if this matter proceeds to open court, I assure you, what Ms. Holden has just outlined will be the kindest version of this story he will ever hear. Cole's lawyer slid the papers in front of him. Cole's hand was shaking. He had no choice. He had lost. He signed. He signed away the house he had already lost. He signed off on my primary physical and legal custody. He signed an agreement that his visitation would be on alternating weekends, contingent on him providing all transportation, and that he was expressly forbidden from bringing any unrelated romantic partners or their children to these visitations. Then Mariah slid one last page in front of him. And now, the matter of the $11,450. My client is willing to forgo a protracted fight over your pension. In exchange, you will repay the dissipated funds immediately. I don't have that, Cole whispered, his voice cracking. Reagan, the account? We are aware, Mariah said. Which is why you will be signing over the title to your Ford F-150 truck, valued at $7,000, and the remaining $4,450 will be drawn from your 401k via a queued row. Sign here. He signed. His signature, once so bold and arrogant, was now a small, spidery scratch. It was over. Mariah and I stood up. Cole remained seated, a gray, hollowed-out man. I picked up my briefcase, but I didn't leave. Not yet. I walked around the table and stood directly in front of him. He flinched, but I waited until he slowly, painfully, lifted his gaze to mine. His eyes were red, empty. I just want you to remember this, Cole, I said, my voice quiet, not angry, just final. You spent an entire year telling me I was a bad mom because I used a daycare. You told me I wasn't a real mother. You thought you could just replace me. Look at you now. I let the words hang. You are the one without a house. You are the one without your children. And you are the one without the woman you chose. As if by pure, desperate reflex, his thumb went to his phone on the table. He swiped it open. He was probably looking for something. Anything. A life raft. A text from Lila. I watched as he tapped on her contact. Her face, the one he'd been smiling at for months, was gone. It was just a blank, gray, default icon. He hadn't just lost. He had been erased, blocked. His mistress was gone. His parents, I knew, were not speaking to him. He was, in every sense of the word, the one without. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked out of the conference room, and didn't look back. I stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, I felt the last heavy ounce of his weight lift from my shoulders. When I walked out onto the street, the late autumn air was cold and biting, but I was warm. I pulled the collar of my coat up, and for the first time in years, I felt completely light. I didn't need to know where he would sleep. I didn't need to know if he'd keep his job. My revenge wasn't in his misery. It was in my peace. The score was settled. The books were balanced. It was done. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly want to connect with you. So let me know. Where are you listening from? Please drop your thoughts and where you're tuning in from in the comments below, and subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories. Be sure to like this video, and if this story resonated with you, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.